Happy New Year, everyone. It's a brand new year, 2025. We are now closer to 2030 than we are to the end of 2019. It's crazy that the 2020s are already halfway over, but nonetheless, here we are. And also, not only are we halfway through the decade, and not only is it a new year for you, but 2025 is probably going to be a very bullish and optimistic year for Bitcoin. Obviously, this year is probably going to be very exciting, even more exciting than the last two previous years combined. And also, of course, in January 3rd, this morning here, assuming you're watching on January 3rd, is Bitcoin's 16th birthday. So happy birthday, Bitcoin. It's on sweet 16. So very exciting times. And in this video, to celebrate Bitcoin's 16th birthday, to celebrate the new year and all the upcoming things this year, I'm going to make a few predictions here in this video. Predictions of Bitcoin's price and what is going to happen news-wise when it comes to Bitcoin this year in 2025. So without further ado, let me get into those predictions. Of course, I could be wrong, but this is my best genuine guess. Now, what I was going to do was I was going to be cute and I was going to have 21 predictions, right? I thought, oh, new year, I'm going to have 21 predictions about Bitcoin. But after about 10 or a dozen or so, they were starting to really lack conviction. And so more than anything else in this video, what I want to emphasize is that that is the lesson of the day: conviction and focus. Those are going to be my words of the year that I'm focusing on in my mind, and I encourage that's the same for you. Yes, it might be better to do more, or it might seem like it's better to do more, but if you're doing more and lacking that conviction, then you get weaker and weaker, right? So instead of having more predictions or more guesses in this video, I'm going to have fewer predictions that I have higher confidence with, because I think ultimately that's what you need more of. You need a smaller amount of high conviction predictions and a large amount of low conviction predictions. So I think more than any specific prediction, this is the thing to keep in mind. This is my strong encouragement. So instead of 21, I have 10 predictions for 2025. First prediction here is that Bitcoin is going to be the world's best performing commodity for the year in 2025. Now, why am I phrasing it that way? It's because I have absolutely no idea what the Bitcoin price is going to do. My price prediction obviously is up, but I think that the specific number doesn't actually really matter. You know, a lot of people would say that they know what the price is going to be. They know it's going to $200,000. They know it's going to $500,000. They know it's going to X, Y, or Z price, right? That's what most people want to say. But in my opinion, I don't have any specific market edge or knowledge as to what exactly it's going to do, but I do think it's going to go up. So my prediction is that it goes up. And really what I would encourage you to keep in mind is not looking for a specific price target to look to meet. What you should probably, in a more healthy way, keep in mind is just remember that it doesn't matter what that outside of your control is going to do. Focus on what is in your control. It is outside of your control to what price, high or low, Bitcoin goes to. It is within your control to buy the commodity that you think has the highest probability of outperforming every other commodity in the world. Obviously, that is Bitcoin. So I don't really care whether Bitcoin goes to 150,000, 200, 250,000, 300, 400, or $700,000. I don't particularly care what it does in this upcoming year, because I know that no matter what, it's very likely going to outperform every other commodity in the world. So that is my first prediction. I have a lot of confidence talking about. Now, I know that some people are going to want more specifics, so let me add a little specific side note onto that. I think it's going to spend well over 90% of the year in the six figures, perhaps even in the multi six figures, but above $100,000, I think Bitcoin's going to spend at least 90% of the year above $100,000. Now, at the time of recording, Bitcoin is $97,000. So that means that, you know, it being 100 grand, right? I think that it's going to be a very short period of time that we're under $100,000. Obviously, we're under now. This first couple weeks in January, we're probably going to be under. Maybe later in this year, we get back below $100,000. But I think it's a very safe, optimistic bet to say Bitcoin's going to spend the vast majority of the year in hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially a significant period of time well above $100,000 into the two or maybe even $300,000 range. But whatever the case, I think Bitcoin is going to be the best performing commodity of this year. Prediction number one. Prediction number two, I think MicroStrategy is going to be the world's best performing security. Now, if you'll notice on prediction one and two, I had this little asterisk here, right? Excluding tiny, illiquid assets, right? I don't literally think MicroStrategy is going to be the best performing security, right? Obviously, there will be stocks that perform better for specific periods of time or perhaps throughout the entire year, right? Obviously, there are probably going to be commodities outperform Bitcoin in specific periods of time or the entire year. What I'm talking about here are large assets, right? We're talking about when it comes to companies and securities, we're talking about multi-deca billion-dollar companies, $100 billion companies, right? We're talking about large liquid American companies, right? When we're talking about commodities, sure, there may be plenty of commodities, maybe multiple commodities that outperform Bitcoin in terms of price and percentage-based returns, but Bitcoin is the global multi-trillion-dollar asset, right? When we're talking about multi-trillion-dollar assets, multi-trillion-dollar commodities, I think Bitcoin obviously is going to be the world's best performing. Likewise with MicroStrategy, I think there'd be tiny illiquid assets, right? Securities that maybe outperform it for a certain period of time or throughout the course of the entire year. But again, it doesn't really matter how high it goes or what point it gets to that high. All it matters is that when you have a long-term time horizon, let's say a year or more, all it matters is which has the best odds of doing the best. That is the best odds of doing the best, in my opinion. That's prediction number 2. Nothing too crazy or that controversial so far. So let's get a little more crazy and controversial. Okay, the Federal Reserve, I believe, will lower interest rates. How much? I have no idea. But I think, again, that is the signal in the noise. Okay, the people with the noise want to have you guess how much here and that and the other, right? I would say just zoom out, have a longer term time horizon, have a bigger, wider frame for your picture. Just remember that. We don't know. We can't predict if there's going to be a recession. If there is a recession, we can't predict how bad it's going to be or what sectors or economic factors is going to impact the most, right? We can make all kinds of predictions about what specifically are the symptoms of the problem, but I think we have to zoom out and just remember the big picture idea that the Fed is lowering interest rates. And not only are they probably going to continue lowering interest rates, and not only should that keep you really, really bullish and optimistic, but probably prediction number 4, the USD monetary supply, the number of dollars in existence, will probably expand more in the next 12 months than the previous 36 months combined. That is a prediction I have, is that we're going to have more printing, more dollar creation in the next year than the previous 3 years or so, right? Maybe you want to say 2.5 years. We'll say 2.5 or 3 years, right? The point is that for all of 2024, 2023, and 2022, we have had a net flat and slightly negative expansion rate for the US dollar, right? This is why, we've seen all kinds of things tighten down, right? We've seen people feel really tight in cash, right? Lending has become a lot more stricter, right? That's a contributing factor to why interest rates have gone up so much, right? It's a lot harder to get access to the dollars. We printed so many dollars in 2020 and 2021 that the Fed and the government had to really rein it in for the last 2.5 to 3 years or so, right? And now we have this big problem that even though we've been slightly flat, slightly up in recent months, especially the last 6 to 12 months or so, I think we're going to have another leg up, right? In the same way that we printed more dollars in 2020 and 2021 than the entire second half of the 2010s, I think that's very likely what we could be looking at, is that this year we're probably going to print more dollars than the last 3 years combined. So again, I'm not saying a prediction of exactly how many dollars because I have a low confidence in saying a specific number. It really depends on the reason why. Are we printing more dollars because of a recession? Are we printing more dollars because of a war, God forbid? Are we printing more dollars because of some new entitlement program, right? We really don't know what the reason is going to be behind the print, but I think we are going to have one. And I think that whatever it is going to be larger than the previous one. Now, it could be bigger than the COVID one in 2020 and 2021, right? If we're looking at 7, 8, 9, $10 trillion print in the next 12 to 24 months, that would be bigger than the COVID prints. I don't have enough confidence to say we're going to outpace that. I really don't know. Nobody really knows, right? People with a lot more money on the line have it be their job or their entire firm's job to try to guess that, right? So obviously nobody knows, but I think that the odds are very, very high that we're going to see a lot of printing in the future. So again, focus much less on what exactly could the price of Bitcoin be by X date. Focus much more on what is the trend, what is the direction of where things are going. This is, in my opinion, obviously where we are right now. Where we are right now is that we've been very tight for the last couple of years in response to COVID. I think it's very high odds that we're going to have more printing this year. And I think it's pretty safe to say we're probably going to have more printing in 2025 and definitely between 2025 and 2026 than the last 2 or 3 years combined. Now, prediction number 5. I think it's still pretty good odds that the price of Bitcoin at some point in 2025 will be the all-time high until probably 2027 or 2028, right? Now, this prediction is more in line with 4-year cycle kind of thinking, right? I think a super cycle, I think a super cycle is possible for Bitcoin. I think that's a non-zero chance, right? If we have central banks that come out and start printing for Bitcoin, I think there's a non-zero chance that we don't have a bear market again. I think there's a non-zero chance it just keeps going up. However, if we're talking in probabilities, I think that the odds of that are not the highest, right? I think it's more likely that at some point we have some sort of crash or correction again, right? Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be the same as previous 4-year cycles, right? Previous 4-year cycles, we'd expect a 70% crash. Maybe we don't have a 70% crash. Maybe it's only a 50% crash. Maybe it's only a 40% crash, right? Maybe the timeline, instead of 18 months, is longer, like 24, 36 months, right? My point is that there are many different ways to the upside and to the downside at which this cycle could be different this time than previous cycles that still result in the all-time high for Bitcoin price until 2027 or 2028, still resulting in this year, right? That I think there's a wide variety of different probabilities, but I think it's going to be a pretty safe bet, especially depending on how high we go, that in 2025, it's probably going to be the high at least for another 1 to 3 years or so after this year. Now, again, that could totally be wrong. And I'm not saying trade based on that. I'm not saying predict based on that, right? Because again, just because you think something might happen doesn't mean that you don't protect against it, right? Just because I don't think my house is going to burn down doesn't mean that every single month I'm going to just magically stop paying the fire insurance, bill on it, right? It's like just because you think something has a low probability of happening doesn't mean you don't protect against it, right? Every single time I drive my car, I wear my seatbelt. I don't expect to have a car accident today, right? Inherently, literally every single time you get in the car, you don't expect to be in a car accident, but yet literally every single time you still put on your seatbelt. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. I am not saying sell all your Bitcoin at the top because Luke said, oh, it's going to go down for the next year. Okay, I'm saying with all these predictions, think in terms of probabilities, right? There's a very, very likely chance at some point this year, we're going to be looking at a vertical green hockey stick for the Bitcoin price. And it's going to be reasonable to say, yeah, probably downside for the next 1 to 2 years in terms of dollars is going to be more likely than continued upside, right? It's probably going to be some sort of dip, right? Already since the very bottom in late 2022, from the bottom in 2022 at $16,000 per Bitcoin, now here floating around $100,000 a Bitcoin, 2 years later, it's basically been up only. Like we've barely had 15, 20, or 30% corrections for Bitcoin in the last 2 years. Like it has been basically an up-only bull market for the last 2 years, which is very exciting and very optimistic for the next year, especially with the long consolidations we've had, mid-2024, late 2023, right? We've had very long consolidations. I think it's been very healthy. But my point, nonetheless, is that even if we get to the point where we all are kind of looking around saying, downside seems to be pretty likely here in the near term, that doesn't mean that you should be selling all of your Bitcoin. Because again, just like with the car, the fire insurance, there could be that moment where we're all wrong, and the path at which we are wrong results in further upside. So again, that's just a guess. That's just a prediction. Okay, now we're not even talking about 2025. We're talking beyond over the next couple of years. But I think, there's a greater than 51% chance odds that the all-time high for the next 3 or so years is going to be in the upcoming 12 months here in 2025. That's my 5th prediction. 6th prediction. Ooh, this one's going to make some people angry. I think that the token cycle, right, of the other chains, I think that cycle is going to disappoint, right? Why? Because pretty much everyone now knows, why do you trade all these other things? You trade it for more Bitcoin, right? Pretty much everyone knows you trade to buy more Bitcoin. You trade to buy more Bitcoin, right? But the problem is that now we have been having increasing competition, right? Increasing competition with actual securities, right? Like MicroStrategy, right? Like MetaPlanet, like Fold now, right? Like MSTX, MSTY, MSTU, right? Like MicroStrategy is being basically this Trojan horse bringing Bitcoin to the traditional stock market. And what happens if in the next 6 to 12 months we have not 1, not 3, not 5, but we have 8 or 10 or 20 different companies, traded on the stock market that you're able to buy and sell and trade them for more Bitcoin, quote unquote, right? It's like the only reason people trade Dogecoin or XRP or Fartcoin or whatever the heck it is, right? It's pretty much the big reason why people trade those things. They're trading it for more Bitcoin, quote unquote, right? It's like, oh, I know it's not smart, but I'm still going to do it because I think I can get more. Well, guess what? Everyone else on the trade along with you is also thinking the same thing. It's inherently a zero-sum game thing. If you're somebody watching this video right now and you are still trading all these other things, you know what you're doing, right? If you're still doing that, I would highly encourage you to be very skeptical of that because you're playing a zero-sum game. You are going to win inherently as somebody else who also is aware they're playing this game getting out of the game before you. Okay, it's a zero-sum game. It's a game of musical chairs. When you're taking a chair, you're inherently removing somebody else from another chair, right? That's exactly how this is going to go. And you got to be very, very honest with yourself. Are you really the smartest person in the room that's going to figure out that cycle better than everyone else? Maybe you are. I'm telling you, you almost certainly probably are not, right? Because there's going to be more and more demand. Why, if I'm trying to get more Bitcoin, why would I go into the degenerate unregistered security space when I could just stay in the registered security space, right? Why would I cash out my 401k or my retirement accounts to go play as a degenerate in the meme coin space when I could just do that within my retirement account, right? If you are betting on more and more liquidity in the next couple of years flowing into your degenerate gambles and hoping that you're going to cash out of the zero-sum game before everyone else does, you got to really think about that. Maybe the liquidity is coming to the degenerate gambles, right? But are they really going to be leaving? Are they really going to be rotating, right? With the Bitcoin ETFs, we have all this liquidity coming in for the Bitcoin ETFs. Is that liquidity really going to spill into those tokens, right? This is what previous cycles have had. Bitcoin goes up, the meme coins go up following Bitcoin, right? Eventually, the returns from the meme coins are so large that people take cash off the table when it comes to Bitcoin, starts to roll over, then the meme coins, and then we have a new bear market, right? But what if this upcoming cycle, my point is that what if that doesn't happen, right? Is the incoming liquidity and capital from the strategic Bitcoin reserve really going to be flowing into Altcoin at some point, right? Is the liquidity coming into the Bitcoin ETFs, which has been the best performing ETFs in history, by the way? How is that liquidity really going to flow into XRP? Like, you got to be honest with yourself when it comes to your trading or whatever you're doing, right? I think it's going to disappoint. Now, again, I'm not making a specific numeric prediction here because I'm not confident enough to give that, right? And if you're going to complain in the comments that, oh, Luke doesn't have any guts because he's not actually making any solid predictions here. I mean, again, I'm making a very solid prediction. I think it's going to dramatically disappoint that cycle. I don't know what metric you want to look at for that, right? But I would say don't focus on people's specific predictions of what Bitcoin dominance is going to do or the market cap of all the non-Bitcoin cryptos or this, right? Don't focus on the specific numbers. Focus on the larger picture trend and idea here. I think the trend is away from the unregistered securities that you're playing in a zero-sum game that attracts retail degens. And I think you're transitioning to BlackRock, Fidelity, and other major global asset players recommending the 2 to 5% to Bitcoin for their 20 million millionaire clients, right? I think that's the trend you're going to and away from the former. And so I think that if you're trying to trade those things to get more Bitcoin, I think that you're going to be only hurting yourself in the foot. You'll probably make money in terms of dollars, right? The prices for all those degenerate tokens will probably go up, but will they go up as quickly as Bitcoin? I don't know. What I can tell you is this: there is no strategic reserve being discussed for XRP. There's no ETF being discussed for Fartcoin. So yes, Bitcoin's market cap is higher. Yes, it takes more capital to move Bitcoin's market cap 5% than it takes to move your tiny little degenerate token 5%. But at the end of the day, there's way more attention coming to Bitcoin. Money trends to one. That's prediction number 6. I think that cycle is going to disappoint. I think that is really going to surprise people. Prediction number 7. I think multiple US states and multiple foreign countries will adopt Bitcoin. That's my prediction. Just a couple days ago, we saw a letter to the Swiss asking them to consider Bitcoin for Bitcoin for their treasuries, right? We've had Michigan and Wisconsin pension state funds take a tiny infinitesimal allocation to Bitcoin, right? Way less than 0.5%. We've had Florida look at a significantly larger allocation. Of course, there are many other states that are passing various kinds of pro-Bitcoin legislation or attempting to pass that kind of pro-Bitcoin legislation, right? Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Texas, I believe Wyoming, Delaware, a few others that come to mind. But the point is that, again, I'm not making a specific prediction of who, because I don't know. I don't sit in any of the senates of these states. But again, I think focus on the signal. I think we're going to be looking at, in 12 months, multiple states starting to buy Bitcoin for their state reserves, right? And I think especially if the US does that, then that makes this even more obvious, right? Likewise, I think we're going to see multiple foreign countries looking to adopt Bitcoin. There are rumors now of 5 different foreign countries talking about passing legislation for that. Right now, again, that's going to take a very long time. Are all 5 of them going to pass it? No, almost certainly not, right? Are they going to make big allocations at the start? No, absolutely not, right? You're probably going to have 2 out of the 5 actually pass it, and it's going to be way less than a couple percent allocation, right? But again, a lot of people that are pessimists would look at that and say, oh, nothing's happening. Oh, it's just a bunch of hype. But again, zoom out and focus on the big picture, right? This was not a conversation 5 years ago, and yet here we are, and the conversation is being had. And I think it's a very safe prediction to say this year we're going to be looking at multiple states and foreign countries to some degree adopting Bitcoin. Prediction number 8, likewise back at home here in the United States, I believe Trump will indeed pass a strategic Bitcoin reserve, quote unquote. Now, I think the really big question, I think the bigger question at this point than will he pass it is how will he pass it? Is he going to pass a strategic Bitcoin reserve only protecting the Bitcoin the US government already has? Or is he going to pass a strategic Bitcoin reserve wanting to increase the number of Bitcoins the US government has, right? Because technically, the only thing Trump has promised has been a strategic Bitcoin reserve, excuse me, with the 250,000 or so Bitcoin the US government already has. That's technically all he has promised for when it comes to the strategic reserve, right? So, some people say, oh, he's not going to do it. I think he's actually going to do it because that was a very explicit promise. He was paid tens of millions of dollars to make that explicit promise. It's something that is a very high upside for him in terms of voter base and a very low downside for the US government because they don't have to print a single dollar to get any more Bitcoin, right? They literally already are holding it, right? So I think it's something that is, I'm very, very confident he's at least going to do that. I think the big question and the question that matters is then is he going to say, oh yeah, by the way, we want to buy another 750,000 Bitcoin to get to 1,000,000 Bitcoin. Oh yeah, by the way, we want to buy 5 million Bitcoin over the course of the next 20 years or whatever, right? I think that's the big question. To what degree and how is he going to announce the strategic Bitcoin reserve? And how is it going to be passed? Is it going to be executive order? Is it going to be some combination of executive orders and larger legislation? I don't know what's going to happen, obviously, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see. So I think there's a very high chance he's going to desire to increase the stack of the U.S. government, right? Obviously, his sons, Eric and Dow Jr. have been at various Bitcoin events and conferences saying that he's going to do this and talking about it, right? So I think this is a very, very important marker, right? And even if he disappoints a lot of people and only has the reserve for the current amount of Bitcoin, I think it is still a significant event because even if Trump fails on that promise, I think the possibility of him fulfilling that promise is again going to emphasize prediction number 7 of multiple states and foreign countries adopting Bitcoin, right? You don't need a 100% probability for the US government to be stacking Bitcoin at the national level for US states and foreign countries to decide to begin stacking Bitcoin, right? Because again, people that are smart, people that have a lot of money, people that are thinking critically, never think in absolutes. They only think in probabilities, right? Again, with the fire insurance to the seatbelt analogy, right? You don't need America to be 100% all in Bitcoin for other countries to realize it's a prudent and wise strategy to no longer be on 0% when it comes to Bitcoin, right? So again, this is all about feedback loops and all about probabilities, nothing with absolutes. But I think that the network effect is only growing. And of course, the more probability it is that Trump's going to do this, right? Going from 1% to 2% to 5% to 10% odds, the more likely it's going to be for the states and other countries to do this, which in turn makes it only more likely for Trump to do it, which in turn makes even more states and foreign countries like, it's a feedback loop, right? My point is that it doesn't matter what X thing happens by Y date. What matters is that the feedback loop continues and the trend continues because once that feedback loop starts, it's just going to keep going. It's probably not going to unwind. The only question at that point is a matter of when and to what degree, not if it's going to happen. Prediction number 9. I do not think any major ETFs or Bitcoin exchanges are going to go bust, right? Again, it's possible. I'm not saying hold your Bitcoin on exchanges. I'm not saying trust the ETFs. I would not trust the ETFs. I would definitely not trust the Bitcoin exchanges. You should get your coins off exchanges. If you don't have self-custody, you're being a hypocrite to yourself and accepting all the counterparty risk of the fiat system, plus all the inherent risk of the Bitcoin system, while pretending that somehow you're out of the fiat system in the Bitcoin system. You're not. You're being a hypocrite to yourself and you're accepting way too much risk for your money. So I'm not saying hold your money in an ETF or an exchange. What I am saying, though, is that I think it's more likely than not that we're probably not going to see any major blowups in 2025. Now, 2026, I think that could be a very different story. Okay, if it doesn't happen next year, I think it might happen in 2026 or 2027. But my point is, I don't think in the next year we're going to see Binance go down. Now, maybe that ages poorly, right? I don't think we're going to see Coinbase go down. I don't think we're going to see BlackRock lose all their coins, right? I don't think it is the most likely scenario we're going to see that happen. It's a non-zero chance, but I don't think it's very likely. However, What I do have very strong confidence in is that I believe at least 100,000 Bitcoin are going to be lost or stolen from exchanges and or poor or subpar self-custody setups, okay? That's something a lot of people don't consider. If you're watching this right now and you have Bitcoin on exchanges, I want you to pay attention here, okay? A lot of people on exchanges want to focus about the unknown, small chance, terrifying thing, and they are ignoring, blindly accepting the large, massive risk they've come to accept in front of them, right? I like to compare it like with texting and driving versus a spider, right? If you're in your living room here and you see a spider or a mouse run across your living room floor, you tend to freak out, right? You tend to scream, you tend to yelp, you tend to catch your breath, right? You run around trying to kill it, right? You freak out about the thing that's not going to kill you. It's not going to hurt you, right? The worst case scenario is that the little thing bites you and it gives you a little infection for a week or two, right? Like that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's not going to kill you, almost certainly. But at the same time, I go on the highway and I see everybody, texting and driving, right? My point is that we will willingly accept the massive risk that actually is life or death, right? Because it's a risk we are willing to tolerate, while we will freak out about the risk that is almost certainly not going to hurt us, right? And so if you have your Bitcoin on exchanges, maybe you're terrified of the US government taking everyone's Bitcoin. Maybe you're terrified of the exchanges going down, right? Maybe you're terrified that Coinbase is going to steal everyone's Bitcoin, right? Maybe you're terrified of those things. I'm not saying it's a non-0% chance, right? I think those things someday very well could happen. But my point is, if you have Bitcoin on exchanges, your number one threat is that they can be withdrawn from your exchange and there's nothing you can do, right? In the same way that some hacker, some kid, some 12-year-old in some foreign country you can't even point to on a map is going to find your information, log into your exchange for you, and withdraw before you even know what's happened, right? I see that many times. I have yet to talk to anyone that has had their Bitcoin and their Bitcoin exchange be confiscated due to a government 6102 order, right? I'm yet to see that happen. That could definitely happen, and you should definitely get your Bitcoin off exchanges for that reason. However, I have talked to many people that have had their private information leaked to somebody, and then that person steals their Bitcoin from those exchanges, right? If you have half of a Bitcoin on Coinbase right now, and somebody were to find your name, your address, your proper tax identification info, your driver's license, whatever it is, and the same way that they could take your credit card information or log into your bank accounts, if they log into that Coinbase account and they withdraw that half of the Bitcoin, they get 50 grand that they can run to the high hills with, right? They can't do that in the same way with a credit card or a debit card, right? Because why? Bank account transactions can be reversed. Bitcoin transactions cannot be reversed. If you got half a Bitcoin on Coinbase right now, you got $50,000 sitting there that somebody can just take. You are being completely negligent with your wealth and your children's wealth, right? If you have 5 Bitcoin on a Bitcoin exchange, you're being not 10 times more destructive with your own purchasing power and wealth. You're being 30 times more destructive because the incentive is not 10 times greater for somebody to come after you. That honeypot may only be 10 times greater, but it's such a higher payout. You're just begging somebody to log into your Coinbase or your Kraken or your Gemini or whatever the heck it is exchange you have account and withdraw that Bitcoin for you, right? If you have your Bitcoin on exchanges still in 2025 somehow, I am begging you, reach out to me or somebody for goodness sakes and have them help you withdraw from exchanges safely to where you're not going to lose your Bitcoin, right? So please, my emphasis is do not delay. If you have your Bitcoin on exchanges, I don't care if it's only 5 Bitcoin. I don't care if it's 10 Bitcoin. I don't care if it's 1/10 of 1 Bitcoin, okay? If you got 1/10 of 1 Bitcoin, that's $10,000. Do you really think that some person in some place in the world is going to be willing to put in a decent amount of effort to try to figure out how they can log into your exchange and withdraw 10 grand that they can just run away with and nobody's going to catch them, right? Almost certainly, right? This is my point. I don't care if you have a lot of Bitcoin or a little Bitcoin, get it off of the exchanges. Even though I don't think, back to prediction number 9, even though I don't think that any big exchange is going to go collapse in FTX style, even though I don't think it's the most probable scenario ETFs are going to fail, right? There is no excuse to not get off exchanges. I'm making this very clear. Even if you don't think the ETFs or exchanges are fraudulent, even if you don't think that they're going to collapse your money this year, right? Even if you don't think that is the most probable scenario, it is still ridiculous to have your Bitcoin on exchanges. So text the phone number on the screen, send your name, send your email address, send your question. I'll be more than happy to help you and walk you through one-on-one, helping you get your Bitcoin off exchanges. Or you can find me in the link in info in the description below. Okay, please just do it. Okay, again, I don't think we're going to have a big collapse this year when it comes to these things, right? I think the trend is on our side. I don't think they're going to go under. However, all the same, they still very well could. And if they do, you don't want to be on those exchanges or those ETFs, right? And even if they don't this year, they very well could next year, right? They're much more likely to fail in the bear market than they are in a bull market, right? So again, that's my emphasis. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges. Okay. Prediction number 10. I think there is going to be a growing narrative that we are either approaching or in peak single sig adoption, right? This is a narrative I've been talking about for years now. It is something that is still very tiny in the Bitcoin space. However, I think it's going to grow dramatically, right? Why is that? It's because Bitcoin custody changes over time, right? There was a point in Bitcoin's history, 13, 14 years ago or so, where seed words did not exist. Then they do exist, right? With BIP39. Now we do have seed words. And now we're at the point in time in Bitcoin's history where it's late enough into Bitcoin that people have an incentive to take self-custody, but we're still early enough to Bitcoin that no quote unquote insignificant amount of Bitcoin is still a significant amount of wealth, right? We are early enough to Bitcoin that it's actually valuable, right? A single Bitcoin's 100 grand, right? But we're still early enough to Bitcoin that it's not inherently generational wealth, right? We're not looking at 10 million, $50 million of Bitcoin, right? In the long-term future, people with 5 million sats are not going to casually have 5 million sats on a single sig in their house safe, right? Why? Because 5 million sats at that time in the future is going to be 100 years worth of salary, and you want to store 100 years worth of diamonds in your bedroom safe. No, you absolutely want to do that. Why? Because it's a safety concern for yourself and your family, and it's something very easy for somebody to predict exactly where that is, right? This is my point. There was going to be some point in Bitcoin's history where we reach peak single sig self-custody adoption. I don't know what that year is going to be. I do think, though, it's probably going to be at some point in the next 10 years, if it's not already happened. Why? There are at most 20 million people that are going to be able to use the base layer of Bitcoin. Okay, at most 20 million people. Over the last decade or so, 2 million of those little devices, the little ledgers, treasures, cold cards, whatever it is, 2 million of those devices have been sold. Now, most people that have one of those devices typically have 2, 3, 5, even 10 of those devices or more. So we can therefore be pretty confident that at most there are 2 million people that actually are using Bitcoin in a form of a single sig adoption, right? So that means that we're already 10% through of the 20 million people that can use the base layer. And so what that means is that that number can't grow forever. If we double the number of adopters that are using single sig, well, that's a fifth of all of the users of base chain forever, right? If we triple that number and we go up to 6 million people are using it, well, now we're getting close to a third of them all, right? And I think thinking ahead in the far-term future, when this is the digital Manhattan that it will become, and every single UTXO, every single million sats is generational wealth, I don't think it's very likely that we're going to be looking at a third of the world's Bitcoin, of the world a third of all the main chain users at Bitcoin being just individuals that casually are holding life-altering amounts of money in their head or in their safe or in their back pocket or on their phone, right? I just don't think that's going to be the case. And so therefore, there will be a time where we reach max peak adoption within Bitcoin as self-custody. There's going to be a time in the future where the majority of people are using sidechain, higher chain, Liquid, Lightning, Arc, whatever it is. There's going to be a point in time where more people are using that than they're using the self-custody routes, right? Maybe you want to argue we're already there because exchanges have adopted more people to Bitcoin, quote unquote, than Bitcoin self-custody has, right? Granted, those users typically have a smaller amount of money on there, but the point still stands in terms of the number of adopters. So when it comes to the Bitcoin self-custody side, I think that we're going to approach that tipping point, right? We're in these very early eras where we have most of Bitcoin self-custody in the form of single points of failure. Probably there's going to be a heyday or golden age, let's say, of Bitcoin multi-point of failure custody models, right? Like multi-sig or things that are yet to be invented, right? Those kinds of things I think are probably going to have their heyday at some point in the 2030s or 2040s. And after that, then it's probably going to be just even more crazy stuff as we transition from store value to mean of exchange. But the long-term trend I want to say here is I think this is one of the most important transitions in all of Bitcoin. There's probably only going to be so many of these transitions in all of Bitcoin's history, and we're probably reaching that peak adoption level, right? A metaphor maybe to help with all this is that of like digital Manhattan, right? It's like if we are in Manhattan in the 1640s, which is where we about are in terms of Bitcoin global adoption, right? If we're this early, pretty much everybody that owns land in Manhattan has, a tiny little wooden hut there or a shed there or some pigs over there, right? We're at the point in time where pretty much all the land owned on this island in Manhattan is owned by individuals, right? But if we visualize ourselves a couple hundred years in the future where there's the Empire State Building over there, Grand Central Station over there, the towers here, you have all these landmarks there. Well, obviously, most people don't own just a block of Manhattan casually, right? Most people, most entities, I should say, that actually owned base layer land in Manhattan are institutions, collaborations of people, partnerships, or mega corporations, right? The day of the average person casually having the deed to their half a block of New York City in their bedroom, those days are just gone, right? And so there will be a peak in time where we've reached the peak point in the adoption of Manhattan where people have the deed to that land casually in a single point of failure, right? That has to reach a peak at some point. And I think when it comes to Bitcoin, we are either at that peak or we are rapidly approaching that peak within the next couple of years. All that to say is that I think this year in 2025, this narrative that I'm describing right here is going to increase in popular commonality by a factor of 10. I think we're going to go from 1 in 100 people in Bitcoin talking about this to 1 in 10 people in Bitcoin talking about this. I've been talking about this for years already. It is still something most people are procrastinating. It is still something that is still a very counter-narrative kind of discussion here. However, I think you're only going to see in coming years that I'm going to be proven more and more and more right as this continues to unfold. Okay, so this is my big encouragement for this year, right? This is the time to take action right now. If you don't have Bitcoin, I highly encourage you to start allocating and buying some Bitcoin. If you already have some Bitcoin, a significant amount, let's say more than 10 million sats, 1/10 of one Bitcoin, $10,000 at the time of recording, I highly encourage you to begin considering taking it off of exchanges as soon as possible. Forget the possibility of the US government stealing it. Forget the possibility of the exchange being completely fraudulent. But keep in mind, as possible as those things are, it's 10 times more likely somebody's going to log into your exchange and steal those funds in the same way they would log into your credit card, your bank information, whatever, right? It's the same amount of work for them to do. If anything, it's a bit easier, but they get 10 times more money with 10 times lower probability that somebody's going to come after them, right? This is something I talk about all the time. You have less in common with the near future than the ancient past. Congratulations. You've made it through the last couple of years where nobody has scammed you out of your Bitcoin still sitting on Venmo or PayPal. But guess what, buddy? You're going to have 10 times more sentiment when it comes to Bitcoin in the next 12 months. And don't you think that's going to attract some of these scammers? All these scammers are so focused on scamming old ladies out of their little coupon or credit card, whatever scams, right? They're not even paying attention to you, right? And the same way that the banks, that the average person hasn't been paying attention to Bitcoin, your average scammer and malicious actor online has been paying attention to it because to them, they're making a killing. They're making so much money in these other industries, they haven't begun to consider you. However, in the course of the next 12 months, when Bitcoin sentiment begins to skyrocket, what do you think is going to happen? They're all going to come rushing back. I am seeing this personally at a heightened rate. I have seen more people in the last 6 weeks have these kinds of attacks happen than the previous 6 months combined. My point is, take this seriously, and maybe you're going to download the vote this video because you think I'm being paranoid, but guess what? Either I'm going to annoy you right now and telling you this, or you're going to reach out to me in 6 months and say, Luke, I had a third of a Bitcoin and I lost it all away. And I'm going to have to say, with the clear conscience, I'm sorry. I tried to warn you. Okay, best to start back from zero. Reach out to me when you get to 1/10 of a Bitcoin, then we can help you withdraw from self-custody again, right? It's like either you're going to hear this message now, or you're going to live this message later. Please, please trust me. You want to take this seriously. Don't verify it for yourself later, because that is a very, very painful verification process. Okay, it takes a lot of pain. So please upgrade your self-custody. If you are still on exchanges, for goodness sake, make this your New Year's resolution. Text me, reach out, get it done. This is a great New Year's resolution. It's probably the biggest ROI for New Year's resolutions you could possibly do. It's so easy. We can have this done in 20 minutes if you just reach out. Okay. Now, if you are somebody that already has self-custody, but you're still in those single points of failure, right? You own your proverbial half a block of Manhattan on the physical paper deed in your home safe. If that's you, where you already have Bitcoin self-custody, but you still have it all in a single point of failure, and you've not considered the possibility of a home robbery, you've not considered the 40% estate tax that the government's going to take from you if something were to happen to you and your family were to inherit that wealth, assuming they were to find that deed, those seed words properly without any loss, right? If that's you, where you're starting to get a little nervous, where you're like, Luke, I've got 2 Bitcoin, I've got 8 Bitcoin, I've got 20 Bitcoin, I've got 62 Bitcoin, whatever your Bitcoin stack is, I don't care. If you're at that point where you're starting to get a little nervous about the custody, tax, and legal repercussions of holding that Bitcoin in the single point of failure where you are the sole individual responsible for everything to do with the custody, tax, and legal planning, if that's starting to frighten you, if it's starting to worry you a little bit, highly encourage you to start to take action with at least just 5%. of that Bitcoin, just 10%, just get off zero. That's my encouragement. Get off zero. You don't have to go all in Bitcoin. You don't have to go all in self-custody, and you don't have to go all in and having a legal and tax professional help you with this stuff. My encouragement is just start and do it, because guess what? Most people are still on zero. They aren't even starting to pay attention to this stuff. So the time to act is now. This is a great New Year's resolution. Upgrade your self-custody. Also, something else that's fun. If you want to sign up for Bitcoin retreats, there are awesome retreats coming up here, right? I got 3 in Central America in the next couple of months. There's Zion in Utah. Coming up in May 2025, Prague in June of 2025. That is going to be an excellent one. So Zion in May, June is Prague, and then there's some more in later in the year, right? New Hampshire and elsewhere later in the year, right? If you are wanting to take things seriously and protect your wealth, or if you're wanting to enjoy time with other Bitcoiners, right? I would highly encourage you to do so, right? Because again, we're reaching mainstream Bitcoin adoption. We have less in common with the near future than the past. The trade-off of having the masses enter Bitcoin, all the normies enter Bitcoin, all the new people enter Bitcoin, is that it's going to be much harder to find like-minded people in Bitcoin that have gone through the same experiences than you, that have ridden the same highs and the same lows of you, right? If you want to actually connect with those people that have gone through that similar Bitcoin experience that you have, instead of having this sea of new people, if you want to pursue those kinds of folks, these kinds of Bitcoin retreats, in my opinion, are the places to go. These are very small, intimate events between 10 to 100 people, not your giant mega conferences that cost twice as much with 150 times more people, right? So if you're looking to have Bitcoin self-custody help, if you're looking to join Bitcoin events, please reach out. Phone number on the screen. Send your name, send your email, send what your specific question or comment you have is. I'll be more than happy to discuss all that with you. But again, self-promotion aside, all that stuff aside, zooming back out to the predictions, that's my point. Conviction and focus. I'm going to be producing a lot more content this year. Something I'm very excited to share is that I'm probably going to be producing more content in the next 12 months than the previous 24 months combined. Please subscribe for more content. My film, The Case for Bitcoin, is coming out really soon here. Really excited for that. I've also got 2 other documentary Bitcoin projects that I've been doing on the down low, on quiet, personally, that I'm really excited to share. Lots and lots of videos, lots of incredible interviews to come. So subscribe for more content, subscribe for more information. Thank you for watching. If you've watched to the end of the video, I want to send you some Satoshis as a Happy New Year present, as an appreciation for, thank you for watching. You guys make this really, really worthwhile. So a bunch of people reached out for me for Christmas with 5,000 sats. So most of you I've responded to. There's a handful of you. I still got to send those sats out. I will do that really soon here. Just give me another day or two. If you did not wish me a Merry Christmas and claim 5,000 sats, text the phone number on the screen here. And wish me a Happy New Year. Just make sure you send your name, email, whatever question you have about Bitcoin, retreats, self-custody, market cycles, whatever it is, just reach out, say hello. I'd love to connect with you. Again, I'm doing that because I'd rather connect with you all now than later down the line, because you all right now are the Bitcoin OGs that have been holding for some significant amount of time, right? The people in the future, we love them, we want them all, but right now is the best time to meet people and talk to people, because it's going to get a lot more difficult in the next 12 months as a lot more excitement and euphoria comes into the market. So if you want 2,025 sats, right? Of course, obviously for 2025, if you want 2,000 sats, text the number on the screen, wish me a Happy New Year, send that information. I'll happily send you 2,000 sats. Thank you so much for your appreciation. Thank you so much for your support. It's meant a lot that you followed me along these last couple of years here. I think we're going to look back 12 months from now and say, wow, 2025 was crazier than 2022, 2023, and 2024 combined. So thank you. Subscribe, text me for those 2,025 sats, and looking forward to this very awesome year. Thanks.